Look, I'm not going to pretend I was a saint in all of this. But I'm not the villain everyone made me out to be, either. I was just a woman who woke up one day and realized she was dying of boredom. A slow, comfortable, utterly predictable death. And honestly, I still can't believe how my meticulous, carefully constructed plan, could have gone so catastrophically wrong. My name is Blair. I'm 29, and for 3 years, I had been living with Grant in his house. Notice I said his house. He bought it 2 years before he met me, a sensible gray colonial with black shutters in a neighborhood where all the lawns were perpetually green and manicured. It was a physical manifestation of his personality. Stable, reliable, and entirely devoid of surprises. Grant was a good man. That was his problem. Goodness, I'd come to realize, isn't a personality trait. It's a baseline. It's the absence of bad. He remembered to pay the electric bill. He took the trash out on Thursday mornings without being asked. And he always bought my favorite brand of coffee. He was a checklist of responsible partnership, and every checked box made me feel a little more like I was suffocating in beige wallpaper. Our evenings had developed a rhythm so ingrained it felt less like a routine and more like a life sentence. He'd come home from his engineering job, kiss my cheek with a distracted peck, and then, after a quiet dinner where I'd recount my day at the marketing firm to his series of thoughtful hums, he would descend into the basement. That was his world. A world of glowing screens, a high-tech headset, and the rhythmic clicking of his mechanical keyboard as he and his online friends saved some digital universe from an imaginary threat. I'd walk past the open basement door and see the colored lights flashing across his face, his expression more animated than I'd seen it all day, and I'd feel a profound and hollow loneliness. I was the responsible adult living upstairs while he had his real life, his real passion, in a dungeon of his own making. I work in an office. It's nothing glamorous, just marketing analytics for a mid-sized corporation. Numbers and spreadsheets. But it paid the bills, and for a while, it was enough. Until it wasn't. Until the gnawing boredom from my home life started to seep into my professional one, tainting everything with a shade of gray. And then, there was Julian. Julian was from the creative department. He wasn't like the other guys in the office who dressed in identical shades of blue and khaki. He wore dark jeans, leather boots, and shirts that actually fit him. He had this easy confidence, a way of leaning in a doorway during a meeting that made everyone unconsciously turn to listen. He had an edge. While Grant was a predictable, comforting novel you've read a dozen times, Julian was a story you couldn't wait to start, full of twists you'd never see coming. The only problem was Brielle, his fiancée. She worked in accounting, a few floors below us. Brielle was exactly the kind of woman you'd expect. She was pretty in a generic way, and her Instagram was a shrine to their relationship. Cringeworthy photos of them in matching sweaters, captions littered with phrases like "my person there" and "forever has a nice ring to it." It made me physically gag. I could tell, just from the curated perfection of her online life, that she was the kind of woman who valued the idea of a perfect relationship more than the reality of one. I knew there was something between Julian and me. It was in the way our lunch breaks would accidentally sync up, the way he'd find excuses to collaborate on projects. It was in the lingering looks when he thought no one was watching. He started making little comments, classic stuff, really, but it worked on me. Brielle doesn't really get my sense of humor, he'd say with a half smile after I'd laughed at one of his dry jokes. Or, it's nice to talk to someone who actually understands the creative process. He was building a bridge, and I was more than willing to meet him halfway. One Thursday evening, I came home after staying late at the office, a choice I made because I knew Julian was there, too. I'd bought a new silk blouse, a deep emerald green, and had gotten my hair touched up. I felt alive, vibrant. I walked in, and the house was silent except for the faint, repetitive sound of digital gunfire from the basement. I found Grant exactly where I knew he'd be, bathed in the glow of his monitor. "Hey," I said, standing in the doorway. He grunted, a sound of acknowledgement, without tearing his eyes from the screen. "Hey, babe. Long day?" "Kind of. Do you like my shirt?" He glanced up for a fraction of a second, his eyes not truly focusing. "Yeah, it's nice. Green." And then he was gone again, back to his world. I stood there for a full minute, the smell of takeout dinner I'd picked up growing cold in my hands. It wasn't that he was malicious. It was worse. It was apathy. I was just part of the furniture in his perfectly stable, perfectly boring life. That night, lying in bed next to his sleeping, steady form, I made a decision. I couldn't just sit here and let my life fade to gray. I couldn't wait for the universe to magically fix my boredom. I needed a plan. A real, strategic plan to get the life I wanted, with the man who actually saw me, and I was going to be the architect of it all. A plan without action is just a daydream, and I was done daydreaming. The very next day, my campaign began. It was a war fought on two fronts. The office, where the prize was Julian, and home, where the objective was a controlled, gradual demolition of my relationship with Grant. At work, I became a masterpiece of calculated effort. The new blouse was just the beginning. I curated my wardrobe with a singular audience in mind. Dresses that were professional but highlighted my figure, heels that made a confident click on the polished office floors. I started wearing a perfume with notes of sandalwood and vanilla, something subtle but memorable. And it worked. "You've done something different," Julian said one morning, catching me by the coffee machine. He wasn't looking at my hair or my makeup, but at me. "You seem brighter." "Maybe I'm just feeling inspired," I replied, my voice a little lower than usual. Meanwhile, Grant remained blissfully oblivious. I could have come home with my head on fire, and he would have probably asked if I could avoid dripping soot on the hardwood floors. His lack of attention, once a source of deep frustration, was now a strategic asset. It gave me cover. My primary strategy with Julian was to become his sanctuary. Brielle, according to his carefully dropped hints, was a whirlwind of wedding planning stress and low-key jealousy. She questioned his late nights at the office and disliked his rowdier group of college friends. So I became the opposite. I was the cool girl, the understanding confidant. We were working late on the Miller account, just the two of us in an otherwise empty office. The city lights twinkled outside the vast conference room window. He loosened his tie and let out a heavy sigh, running a hand through his dark hair. "Everything okay?" I asked, feigning casual concern. "It's just Brielle," he said, slumping into a chair. "We got into another argument about the wedding budget. She wants these ridiculously expensive floral arrangements, and she doesn't seem to understand that we can't just hemorrhage money." I didn't offer advice. I didn't criticize her. I just listened, nodding sympathetically. When he was done venting, I simply said, "That sounds really stressful. It's hard when you feel like you're not on the same team." His eyes met mine across the mahogany table, and I saw a flicker of genuine gratitude. "Exactly," he whispered. "You get it." I was weaving a web, and he was walking right into it, thread by silken thread. The second front of my war was at home. I needed to create distance with Grant, but in a way that would seem natural, like a slow, inevitable drifting apart. If anyone ever questioned me later, I could honestly say we'd been having problems for months. It was about building my case. He'd try to plan our usual boring date nights dinner at the same Italian place, a movie he'd picked that I had no interest in. I started finding excuses. "I'm so sorry, honey, but I'm swamped with the Miller account. I really have to work late." Or, "I'm just exhausted. Can we just have a quiet night in?" He was disappointed but understanding. He was always so damn understanding. The battleground I weaponized most effectively was social media. It was a digital chessboard, and I was playing both sides. For Julian, I began a subtle campaign of public support. I'd like his posts, comment on his work-related achievements with things like, "Brilliant insight, Julian. You nailed it in the presentation today." It was professional enough to be deniable but personal enough for Brielle to notice. And she did. I could tell by the way she started showing up to pick him up from work more often, her eyes scanning the room, her smile a little too tight when she looked at me. Good. Let her feel threatened. Simultaneously, I increased my social media output with Grant. I posted a photo from a hike we'd taken months ago, captioning it, "Love our quiet weekends together." I uploaded a picture of him grilling in the backyard, something utterly mundane, and added a string of heart emojis. It was a smokescreen. It kept our friends and family thinking we were solid, stable Grant and Blair. The funny thing was, Grant actually seemed happy about it. He had no idea he was just a prop in my meticulously crafted exit strategy. He thought my renewed online affection was real. The poor, simple man. It felt good, having this power. For years, I'd felt like a passenger in my own life, coasting along on Grant's predictable currents. Now, I was at the helm, navigating treacherous waters with a clear destination in sight. I was in control. And the most thrilling part was that no one, not the man I was leaving nor the man I was pursuing, had any idea what I was really doing. Impatience is a dangerous thing. For weeks, I had been playing the long game, masterfully pulling the strings of my own life. But Julian, for all his flirtatious glances and confessional complaints, was still not making a real move. His engagement party was just a few months away, a deadline looming on my horizon. If that party happened, I knew it would be infinitely harder to break them up. The universe, it seemed, agreed with my timeline. It presented me with the perfect opportunity, the annual company team-building retreat. It was a mandatory 2-day event at a resort about an hour out of the city. Most people were planning to drive back the same day, but a few of us from senior management were expected to stay the night. As fate, or perhaps my clever manipulation of the booking system, would have it, Julian and I both happened to have rooms booked for the night. Brielle has some family thing she can't get out of, he told me by the coffee machine, a look of theatrical disappointment on his face. I murmured my sympathies. When I told Grant about the overnight retreat, he barely looked up from his laptop. "Okay, have fun," he'd said. He didn't even ask if he could join me, or express any jealousy. He just assumed I'd rather go alone. He was right, of course, but it still stung. He could have at least pretended to care. The daytime activities were as excruciatingly boring as expected trust falls, corporate jargon bingo, and motivational speeches. But I wasn't there for that. I was waiting for the sun to go down. That night, at the hotel bar, the atmosphere shifted. The forced corporate camaraderie dissolved under the influence of expensive cocktails. I found a seat near the fireplace, nursing a glass of wine, and waited. It didn't take long for Julian to find me. He was drinking whiskey, more than usual, and his mood was dark. "She's been texting me nonstop," he muttered, sliding into the armchair opposite me, asking who I'm with, what I'm doing. "It's like she doesn't trust me at all." I played my part perfectly. I was sympathetic, but not pushy. I didn't offer solutions. I just offered an ear. "Wow, that sounds exhausting to deal with," I said, my voice soft. He looked at me, his eyes full of a frustration I knew was about more than just a few text messages. It was the frustration of a man trapped in a life he wasn't sure he wanted. When the bar started to thin out, he offered to walk me back to my room. The tension in the quiet, carpeted hallway was electric. I could feel it crackling in the space between us. This was it. This was the moment. My heart was pounding. He walked me to my door, swiped his own keycard for the room next to mine, and then he just hesitated. "Well, good night, Blair," he said, his voice a little hoarse. And then he went into his own room, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving me alone in the hallway. I was incandescent with fury. I could have screamed. Here I was, looking incredible, being the perfect, understanding, intelligent woman. And he was still playing it safe. He was still choosing his boring, predictable life. I realized then that my subtle strategy wasn't enough. I needed to be bolder. I waited until I was sure the hallways were empty, around midnight. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and walked the 3 steps to his door. I knocked softly. He opened it, looking surprised. He was in a t-shirt and jeans, his hair slightly messy. "Blair, is everything okay?" I had my excuse ready. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I cannot for the life of me figure out that final slide for our presentation tomorrow. I know you had a brilliant idea for it, and I'm just staring at a blank screen." He let me in. His room was a mirror image of mine. We sat at the small desk, the laptop open between us, but we both knew we weren't there to talk about work. The conversation started there, but it quickly spiraled into something deeper. We talked about our relationships, our dreams, about the suffocating feeling of being stuck. With Grant, I confessed, the words feeling both traitorous and liberating. "I feel like I'm a ghost in my own life. He looks at me, but he doesn't see me." "I know what you mean," Julian said, his voice low. "With Brielle, everything is a performance. The perfect couple, the perfect wedding. I feel like I'm playing a part, and I'm forgetting my real lines." As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky outside, we finally crossed the line we had been dancing around for months. It was everything I had imagined. He was passionate, attentive, fully present in a way Grant hadn't been for years. He listened to every word I said, his fingers tracing patterns on my skin as if he were memorizing me. In that hotel room with the sun coming up, I felt seen. I felt chosen. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that my plan was finally, irrevocably in motion. There was no going back now. Returning to the office that Monday was like stepping onto a movie set where only two actors knew the real script. The world saw Blair and Julian, professional colleagues. But, between us, there was a secret, electrifying current. A shared glance across a crowded meeting room held an entire conversation. A private message on the company chat would make my heart leap. We found excuses to be alone together, booking conference rooms for project discussions, staying late after the office had emptied out. The danger of it, the secrecy, was an intoxicating drug. My life with Grant, once just boring, now felt like a black and white film compared to the vibrant technicolor of my affair. At home, I was a ghost. I moved through the rooms of the house I shared with Grant like a polite, distant tenant. He would try to talk to me about his day, about some tedious problem with a server at his work, and I'd give him vacant, one-word answers, my mind a million miles away, replaying a stolen kiss in the stairwell with Julian. "Do you want to go see that new sci-fi movie this weekend?" Grant asked one evening, his hopeful tone grating on my nerves. "Oh, I can't," I said quickly, texting Julian under the table. "We're on a huge deadline with the Miller account. I'll probably be at the office all weekend." Technically, it wasn't a lie. I would be at the office. Julian would be there too. This double life was exhausting, but it was also addictive. It validated everything I had been feeling. Grant had gotten so comfortable, so complacent, that he took me for granted. Julian, on the other hand, made me feel alive, exciting, like a woman worth pursuing. He wanted me, and that feeling was powerful enough to erase any guilt that tried to creep in. But after a few weeks of this thrilling secrecy, a new feeling began to surface: impatience. The high of the affair wasn't enough. I wanted the prize. I wanted the life Julian and I had started to sketch out in our late-night phone calls and whispered conversations. A life where we could be together openly. The wedding, however, was still happening. Brielle was still posting pictures of flower arrangements and cake tastings. Julian was still going through the motions, playing the part of the devoted fiancé. I needed him to make a choice. And fast. I started to push, gently at first. "This sneaking around is so hard," I'd sigh, tracing a finger along his jawline. "I just wish we could be real." I'd talk about how life was too short to settle for someone who didn't truly see you, echoing the words we'd shared in that hotel room. But I was careful. I couldn't seem desperate or clingy. That was Brielle's role. I was the cool, understanding alternative. It was during one of our stolen lunches that I decided it was time to codify the plan, to lay out the terms of surrender. "So what's the next step?" I asked, pushing a piece of salad around my plate. "For us," Julian sighed, the familiar, weary sound he always made when talking about his real life. "I don't know, Blair. It's complicated. The wedding deposits are all paid. Our families are so involved." "So what?" I pressed, keeping my voice even. "You're just going to marry her? And we're just this? A dirty little secret?" "No, of course not," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I just need time." Time was something I was running out of. That's when I laid it all out, not as a demand, but as a logical, strategic solution. It was, I thought, the perfect plan. "You have to be the one to end it," I said calmly. "You break up with Brielle. You tell her you can't go through with it. It has to be clean, and it has to come from you. That way, I'm not the other woman. I'm just the woman you got together with after your engagement ended." He looked relieved that I had a roadmap. Okay, you're right. "And once you're free and clear," I continued, my heart starting to beat faster, "then I'll leave Grant. I'll tell him we've been drifting apart for months, which is true. We can finally be together properly. No sneaking around, no guilt." It was foolproof. It was a clean, surgical extraction from our respective lives. I would guide Julian to the conclusion that was already obvious to everyone but him. His engagement was a huge mistake. Then, I would execute my own exit strategy. I just had to be patient for a little while longer and help him see the light. I was his relationship therapist, his strategist, his savior. And soon, I would be his future. My perfect, foolproof plan began to develop cracks. The first was Julian's infuriating procrastination. He agreed that he had to end things with Brielle, but the right time never seemed to arrive. The engagement party, which I had dreaded as a major obstacle, came and went. I waited, expecting a call or a text the next day telling me it was done. But days turned into a week, and he was still engaged. Her family was in town for the party, he explained during a hurried meeting in the copy room. I couldn't do it then. It would have been cruel. A few days later, it was, she has a huge project deadline at work. She's already so stressed. The excuses piled up, each one more feeble than the last. I started to see a glimmer of a terrifying possibility. Maybe Julian didn't want to be saved. Maybe he just liked complaining. Maybe he enjoyed having the best of both worlds, the stable, picture-perfect fiancé at home, and the exciting, forbidden affair at work. As my anxiety about Julian grew, a second, more alarming crack appeared from a direction I never expected. Grant. After years of benign neglect, he suddenly started paying attention. It was unnerving. He started asking more questions about my day, not just the perfunctory, "How was it?" but specific questions. "Who's on the Miller account with you? What's that guy Julian like?" He started suggesting we spend more quality time together. He wanted to go on weekend trips, have dinner with friends, be a real couple. It was like he'd suddenly woken up from a 3-year nap and decided to start participating in our relationship again. And it was happening at the worst possible time. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I had casually mentioned a company happy hour happening that Friday at a trendy downtown bar. It was an informal thing, but I knew Julian would be there. With Brielle, of course. My plan was to make a brief appearance and leave. That evening, Grant was sitting at the kitchen table when I got home, a travel magazine open in front of him. "Hey," he said, smiling. "About that happy hour on Friday. I was thinking I'll come with you. It would be great to finally meet the people you work with." My blood ran cold. "Oh, you don't have to do that," I said quickly, forcing a laugh. "It's just a boring work thing. You'd be miserable." "Oh, I won't be," he insisted, his expression open and earnest. I want to. I want to be more involved in your world, Blair. I feel like we've been a bit distant lately and I want to fix that." I tried every excuse I could think of, but he was sweetly, stubbornly persistent. It was like he was trying to be the perfect boyfriend at the exact moment I needed him to remain the oblivious one. I was trapped. The night of the happy hour, I was a bundle of nerves. I spent an hour getting ready, trying to find an outfit that looked good, but not too good. When we walked into the crowded, noisy bar, I immediately scanned the room. And there they were, Julian and Brielle, standing with a group of people from my department. And they looked happy. Genuinely happy. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand resting possessively on his arm. I felt a sharp, ugly stab of jealousy that surprised me with its intensity. Grant, to my annoyance, was incredibly charming. He introduced himself to everyone, shaking hands, asking engaging questions about their work. People seemed to genuinely like him. They laughed at his jokes. It was bizarre. I had spent months painting him in my mind as this boring, one-dimensional loser, but here he was, effortlessly winning over my colleagues. The inevitable moment arrived when we were introduced to Julian and Brielle. I could barely breathe. "Grant, this is Julian from our creative team, and his fiancée, Brielle," I said, my voice sounding strained. "So great to finally meet you," Brielle said, her smile bright and friendly. She turned to Grant. "Blair talks about her work so much, it's nice to put a face to a name." "I do?" I thought, panicking. I watched, horrified, as Grant and Brielle hit it off. He complimented her on her work in accounting. She asked him about his engineering projects. Julian, meanwhile, looked guilty as hell. He couldn't meet my eyes, his answers were clipped, and he kept taking large gulps of his beer. He knew. We both knew this was a disaster. The worst part was when Brielle started talking about their wedding plans. "We finally booked the caterer," she gushed, her eyes sparkling. "Julian has been so surprisingly helpful with all the details, haven't you, honey?" I stared at Julian as he nodded along, a weak smile plastered on his face. This was the same man who had complained to me for weeks about that very wedding. The same man who had promised me he was going to end it. Here he was, playing the perfect fiancé, and I was just another colleague, standing there with my boring, stable boyfriend. My carefully constructed reality was shattering. The roles I had assigned everyone, the boring boyfriend, the trapped lover, the basic fiancé, were all wrong. Or maybe I was the only one who had ever believed in them. After an hour of this torture, I feigned a splitting headache and dragged Grant home. In the car, he was buzzing. "Your coworkers are great. That Brielle is so sweet. And her fiancé, Julian, seems like a really cool guy." I nearly swerved into oncoming traffic. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene at the bar. The image of Julian and Brielle, laughing together, so natural and comfortable, was burned into my mind. Maybe I had been the fool all along. Maybe I wasn't the exciting future. Maybe I was just the entertaining distraction. The following week at work was an exercise in pure agony. I tried to act normal, to bury myself in spreadsheets and data, but the happy hour had changed everything. The secret, thrilling connection I'd shared with Julian was gone, replaced by a thick, suffocating awkwardness. He avoided me in the hallways and was suddenly too busy for our project discussions. On Wednesday, he pulled me aside into an empty conference room, the same one where we'd had so many clandestine meetings. My heart leaped with a desperate, foolish hope. I thought he was finally going to tell me he'd ended it, that seeing me with Grant had been the catalyst he needed. I was wrong. "Blair," he started, refusing to meet my eyes. "We need to stop. Whatever this is." I just stared at him, feeling the blood drain from my face. "What are you talking about? Seeing you with Grant the other night?" "It was a wake-up call," he said, his voice low and rushed. "I've been getting cold feet about the wedding, I know, but I think that means I need to focus on my actual relationship, not blow up my entire life for—" He trailed off, gesturing vaguely between us. "For what?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "For what, Julian? For someone you supposedly had feelings for? After everything we shared, everything we planned? Maybe we just got carried away," he said, backing toward the door like a cornered animal. "It was exciting, something new and forbidden, but it's not real life." That's when I realized I had been completely and utterly played. While I was meticulously planning our future, he was just on a thrill ride. I wasn't the destination. I was just a temporary diversion. He never intended to leave his perfect, prepackaged life for me. I didn't handle it well. I started crying, right there in the glass-walled conference room, begging him to explain how he could just throw it all away. He looked deeply uncomfortable, muttered another apology, and fled. I was so blinded by rage and humiliation that I did something incredibly stupid. I went back to my desk, my hands shaking, and I poured all of my hurt and anger into an email. A long, emotional, dispatch email. I wrote about our night at the resort, about the promises he'd made, about how we were soulmates and he was making the biggest mistake of his life by choosing Brielle. It was pathetic and raw, a complete abdication of the cool, strategic woman I had tried to be. But I was hurt, and I wanted him to hurt, too. I hit send. That email was a nuclear bomb, and the fallout was immediate and devastating. Apparently Brielle, in all her trusting but not really glory, had access to his work email account. She saw my message. The next morning, I was summoned to HR. The meeting was a blur of cold corporate jargon, unprofessional conduct, workplace harassment. Julian, of course, had already been in there, saving his own skin. He claimed I had pursued him aggressively, that he had tried to stop it, that my final email was proof of my instability. He threw me so far under the bus I could feel the tire treads on my back. He got to keep his job. I was fired, effective immediately. I stumbled out of the building in a daze, clutching a cardboard box with the sad contents of my desk. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. Word travels fast in a small city. Someone from my company knew someone from Grant's gym. When I got home, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, his expression completely blank. It was a look I'd never seen on his face before, and it terrified me more than any rage ever could. He knew. He didn't just know about Julian. He knew about the length of the affair, about my whole plan to leave him, about the intricate web of lies I'd been spinning for months. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just looked at me, his eyes empty of any affection we'd ever shared. "You have 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live and get your things out of my house," he said, his voice chillingly calm. I tried to apologize, to explain that it wasn't supposed to happen this way, that everything had just gotten out of control. But he wasn't listening. He was already gone, emotionally checked out. He wouldn't even look at me while I was talking. So now, here I am, 3 months later. I live in a tiny, overpriced studio apartment. My unemployment checks barely cover the rent. Julian and Brielle are, from what I can gather online, still happily engaged, their perfect life uninterrupted. He made her block my number. My few work friends have ghosted me, embarrassed by the drama. And Grant? I saw him last week at the grocery store. He was with someone new. She was pretty in a simple, unadorned way. She looked kind. She looked like the kind of woman who would never do what I did. She's probably boring and predictable, but she's also probably loyal and trustworthy. And I guess, in the end, that's what really matters to a man like him. I keep replaying it all in my head, thinking about how different everything would be if Julian had just followed through on his promises. Or if Grant hadn't decided to start paying attention at the worst possible moment. I had a real plan. A smart plan. It should have worked, but everyone else ruined it by not playing their parts the way they were supposed to. Now I'm starting completely over at 29. And honestly, I'm still not sure how I ended up being the villain in this whole story, when all I ever wanted was to be happy with someone who actually appreciated me. But I guess that's just what happens when you try to take control of your own life, instead of just settling for whatever you're given. You risk everything, and sometimes you lose it all.